The morning sky over Talon Prime painted itself in shades of amber and rose, twin suns casting long shadows across the crystalline fields that stretched beyond the settlement's borders. Nia Thorne stood at her kitchen window, watching her 12-year-old son Joran chase fireflies through the luminescent grass, his laughter carrying on the gentle breeze that always seemed to smell of wildflowers and possibility. She smiled, pressing her palm against the cool glass. 6 years they'd been here. 6 years since she'd fled the corporate sectors with nothing but a stolen transport and a frightened child clinging to her skirts. Talon Prime had welcomed them without questions, the way frontier worlds always welcome those seeking a fresh start. The colonists here valued hard work over pedigree, kindness over credentials. "Mom, look." Joran's voice drifted through the open window as he cupped something glowing in his hands. The fireflies on Talon Prime weren't like the Earth variants. She remembered from her own childhood these pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed almost like coded messages, tiny beacons of light in an endless conversation only they understood. Nia's heart swelled with a fierce protectiveness that still surprised her sometimes. When she'd first held him as a baby, she'd never imagined she could love something so completely, so unconditionally. Every scraped knee, every nightmare, every moment of joy, she felt it all twice over, once for herself and once for him. The communication terminal in the corner of the kitchen chirped softly, displaying the day's harvest projections. The crystal farms were exceeding expectations again. The rare minerals that grew in Talon Prime's unique soil, commanding premium prices in the inner systems. It was good news for the colony, though Nia sometimes worried that their success might draw the wrong kind of attention. She pushed the thought away. They were safe here, far from the corporate wars and political machinations that had driven her to flee in the first place. Joran didn't remember much about their old life. He'd been too young when they'd escaped. To him, this was home. These people were family, and the endless sky was his playground. "Mom, are you making breakfast?" Joran appeared in the doorway, his dark hair tousled and his clothes dusted with the glittering pollen that clung to everything on Talon Prime. His eyes, so much like her own, deep brown with flecks of gold, sparkled with excitement. "Mira said her dad caught a moonfish this morning, and they're having a cookout by the lake." Nia ruffled his hair affectionately. "After breakfast and after you help me with the crystal cultivation checks. The plants won't tend themselves, you know." He groaned dramatically, but didn't really complain. Joran had inherited her work ethic along with her eyes, and he took pride in contributing to their small homestead. It was one of the things she loved most about Talon Prime. Children here weren't just sheltered from responsibility. They were taught to be part of something larger than themselves. They worked together in the cultivation domes, checking nutrient levels and adjusting the environmental controls that kept the crystal formations growing at optimal rates. Joran had developed an intuitive understanding of the process that impressed even the colony's agricultural specialists. His small hands were surprisingly gentle as he handled the delicate crystal seedlings, and he seemed to sense when something was wrong with a plant before the monitoring equipment did. "You have a gift," Nia told him as they moved between the rows of shimmering growth. "Your father would have been proud." Joran looked up at her with curiosity. She rarely spoke about his father. The memories were too complicated, too painful. The man she'd loved had been consumed by ambition and corporate politics, becoming someone she no longer recognized. Leaving him had been the hardest decision of her life, but staying would have destroyed them both. "What was he like?" Joran asked softly, continuing his work but clearly hoping for more than the usual vague answers. Nia considered her words carefully. He was brilliant and passionate about his work. He wanted to change the galaxy, make it better for people like us. But somewhere along the way, he forgot that the means matter as much as the ends. It was the truth, if not the whole truth. The whole truth was too dark for a 12-year-old boy who still believed in heroes and happy endings. They finished their work as the twin suns reached their zenith, painting the sky in brilliant white gold. Joran ran ahead toward the lake where smoke was already rising from the cookout fires, his earlier excitement renewed. Nia followed at a more leisurely pace, enjoying the familiar sounds of the colony children playing, adults calling greetings, To one another, the gentle hum of machinery working in harmony with nature. She was halfway to the lake when the first explosion shattered the peaceful morning. The blast wave knocked her to her knees, ears ringing as she watched a pillar of flame and smoke rise from the direction of the communications center. For a moment, she couldn't process what she was seeing. Attacks like this didn't happen on Talon Prime. They were too remote, too unimportant to attract violence. Then she heard the screaming. Joran. She scrambled to her feet, running toward the lake where she'd last seen her son. Behind her, more explosions echoed across the settlement. The acrid smell of burning electronics and worse things filled the air. Corporate security forces were descending from unmarked ships, their armor gleaming with the kind of advanced tech that cost more than most colonies' annual budgets. They moved with ruthless efficiency, herding colonists into groups, stunning anyone who resisted. Naya's blood turned to ice as she recognized the insignia on their armor. Meridian Dynamics, the corporation she'd stolen classified data from 6 years ago. The reason she'd fled to the frontier with Joran. They'd found her at last. She reached the lake to find chaos. Families scattered in all directions as the corporate forces established a perimeter. Some colonists tried to fight back with hunting rifles and improvised weapons, but they were hopelessly outmatched. This wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Mom. Joran's voice cut through the noise, and she saw him crouched behind an overturned table with Mira and her parents. Relief flooded through her, quickly followed by terror as she realized how exposed they were. She ran toward them, dodging pulse blasts and fallen debris. A security trooper moved to intercept her, but she'd learned to fight during her years in the corporate sectors. Her knee found his weak point between armor plates, and she grabbed his weapon as he fell. "This way," she shouted to the group behind the table, laying down covering fire as they moved toward the tree line. If they could reach the forest, they might have a chance to hide until the attack was over. They almost made it. The plasma charge caught her in the back as she shoved Joran toward safety, the searing heat burning through her jacket and into her flesh. She stumbled but kept moving, her body operating on pure maternal instinct even as pain flooded her nervous system. "Mom." Joran tried to come back for her, but Mira's father grabbed him, dragging him into the shelter of the trees. Naya fell to her knees at the forest's edge, her vision blurring as shock set in. Through the haze of pain, she could see the security forces systematically destroying everything the colonists had built. Homes burning, equipment smashed, lives snuffed out with corporate efficiency. But Joran was safe, hidden in the forest, with people who would protect him. That was all that mattered. The security captain approached her, his helmet retracting to reveal a face she recognized from her corporate days. Vex Kronos, ambitious, ruthless, and utterly without conscience. "Naya Thorne," he said, his voice carrying satisfaction and old resentment. "You've led us quite a chase. Did you really think you could steal from Meridian Dynamics and just disappear?" She tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough that tasted of blood and smoke. "The data you stole," he continued. "It's caused considerable embarrassment for certain parties, exposed some operations that were meant to stay buried. My employers are very interested in knowing who else you might have shared it with." Through her fading vision, Naya could see movement in the forest where Joran was hidden. She forced herself to focus, to give nothing away. Whatever happened to her, her son would survive. "Nothing to say." Vex knelt beside her, his expression cruel. "Perhaps you'll be more talkative after some encouragement." He gestured to his men, and they began setting charges around the remaining buildings. The message was clear talk, or watch everything burn. Naya met his gaze steadily, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. "Go to hell." Vex's smile was cold as winter in space. "You first." The explosion that followed lit up the sky like a second sun, consuming everything she'd built, everything she'd loved, everything except the one thing that mattered most, in the forest. A 12-year-old boy watched his world burn and his mother die, and something fundamental broke inside him that would never truly heal. As the flames reached toward the sky, Joran Thorne made a promise that would reshape the galaxy. They would pay for this. Every single one of them would pay. The boy who had chased fireflies through crystal fields was gone forever. In his place stood something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. The galaxy would learn to fear what it had created. The neon-soaked undercity of New Babylon never slept, its vertical sprawl of data markets and black site clinics humming with the kind of business that thrived in shadows. Zara Nightfall, a name she'd crafted as carefully as her digital persona, sat in her cramped apartment 17 levels below the corporate towers, fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that would have made university professors weep with envy. She was 24, though her pale skin and the premature silver streaks in her black hair made her look older. Years of living on synthetic nutrients and recycled air had given her an ethereal, almost ghostly appearance that served her well in her chosen profession. People remembered beautiful faces and ugly ones, but they forgot the ones that seemed to belong to shadows. The data stream she was currently infiltrating belonged to Meridian Dynamics, one of the megacorporations that ruled the galaxy from their pristine towers. High above the street level where she lived, their security was formidable. But Zara had been dancing through corporate firewalls since she was 12. What had started as survival hacking food dispensers and shelter allocations had evolved into something approaching art. Her fingers paused as she encountered an unexpected data cluster, heavily encrypted and buried deep within what should have been routine financial records. Corporate accounting was usually mind-numbingly boring, but this felt different. The encryption was military grade, the kind used for classified operations. What are you hiding?" she murmured, her violet eyes reflecting the glow of the holographic displays. She'd learned long ago that the most interesting secrets were the ones corporations worked hardest to bury. The decryption took 3 hours and most of her processing power. But when the files finally unlocked, Zara felt her blood turn to ice. Personnel records, operational reports, and security footage from something called Operation Cleansing Fire. The target designation, Talon Prime Colony. The videos were worse than the reports. She watched corporate security forces descend on what looked like a peaceful farming settlement, their actions methodical and brutal. Families running in terror, buildings burning, children screaming for parents who would never answer again. But it was the final clip that made her stomach turn. A woman, brown hair, kind eyes, kneeling in the dirt while security captain interrogated her. The woman's defiance in the face of certain death was heartbreaking, but what happened next was worse. The captain, identified in the files as Vex Kronos, gave an order, and the entire settlement erupted in flames. Zara had seen plenty of corporate brutality in her time on the streets, but this was different. This was systematic extermination, carried out with the casual efficiency of a quarterly audit. And according to the timestamps, it had happened 8 years ago. A soft chime from her security system interrupted her horror. Someone was at her door, someone who had bypassed 3 separate alarm systems to get there. Zara's hand moved instinctively to the pulse pistol hidden beneath her desk, but the voice that came through her intercom made her pause. "Zara Nightfall, my name is Marcus Webb. I need to talk to you about Talon Prime." She studied the feed from her door camera. The man standing in her hallway was tall and broad-shouldered, with graying brown hair and scars that spoke of violence survived rather than sought. His clothes were expensive but worn, and he carried himself with the kind of controlled tension that marked former military. More importantly, he was alone and his hands were visible. If he'd wanted to hurt her, there were easier ways than knocking on her door. "How did you find me?" she asked through the intercom, her finger hovering over the alarm that would summon building security. "Not that they'd be much help against someone who'd made it this far. The same way you found those files," he replied, his voice carrying a weariness that sounded genuine. "I've been tracking Meridian's classified operations for 5 years. When someone cracked their Talon Prime records tonight, I traced the intrusion back to you." Zara hesitated. Corporate bounty hunters didn't usually announce themselves, but that didn't mean this man was safe. On the other hand, he'd mentioned Talon Prime specifically, and she'd just spent hours watching footage that had left her feeling sick and angry, and desperately wanting to do something about it. She opened the door, but kept her weapon ready. Up close, Marcus Webb looked even more tired than he'd sounded. His gray eyes held the kind of pain that came from carrying too many regrets. And when he saw the pulse pistol in her hand, he actually smiled. "Smart girl, in your position, I'd be armed too." He made no move to enter uninvited. "May I come in? What I have to tell you isn't safe to discuss in hallways." Against her better judgment, Zara stepped aside. Marcus entered her cluttered apartment and took in the wall of monitors, the jury-rigged processing units, and the general chaos of someone who lived more in digital space than physical reality. "Impressive setup," he said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "I'm guessing you built most of this yourself." "Get to the point," Zara replied, though she lowered her weapon slightly. "What do you want?" Marcus settled into the chair she indicated, moving with the careful precision of someone whose body carried old injuries. 8 years ago, I was a security contractor for Meridian Dynamics. My team was assigned to what we were told was a routine asset recovery on a frontier world called Talon Prime. Zara's eyes widened. She'd been expecting corporate espionage, maybe blackmail. She hadn't been expecting a confession. "We were told that classified data had been stolen and that the thief was hiding among the colonists," Marcus continued, his voice steady but his hands clenched. "Our orders were to locate the target, retrieve the data, and secure the scene. What we found was a peaceful farming settlement with families and children and people who'd never hurt anyone in their lives." He looked up at her, and Zara saw guilt in his expression that had been eating at him for years. "I was there, Zara. I was part of it. And when my squad leader Vex Kronos gave the order to eliminate all potential witnesses, I followed it." The admission hung between them like a physical weight. Zara found herself studying this man who'd helped destroy an entire colony, looking for signs of the monster she expected to find. Instead, she saw someone who looked like he'd been carrying the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly. Marcus was silent for a long moment, staring at his hands. "Because I've spent the last 5 years trying to find a way to make it right. I've been tracking the survivors, documenting the cover-up, gathering evidence. But I'm one man with limited resources, and Meridian has infinite money and lawyers." He looked up at her again. "You're good, Zara. Maybe good enough to help me expose what really happened. To make sure those people didn't die for nothing." Zara studied him, her analytical mind working through the angles. "What makes you think I'd help you? For all I know, this is some elaborate corporate setup. Because you spent 3 hours tonight breaking into systems that could have gotten you disappeared permanently," Marcus replied. "Because when you saw what happened to those people, you didn't just close the files and pretend you'd never seen them. You're still looking at them now." He was right. Even as they talked, part of her attention remained on the monitors showing the Talon Prime footage. The image of that woman Naya, according to the files, kneeling in the dirt while everything she'd built burned around her. "There's something else," Marcus said, his voice dropping. "One of the colonists survived. A boy, maybe 12 years old. He disappeared into the forest during the attack, and we never found him." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "What happened to him? I don't know. But I've been tracking reports of mercenary activity in the outer systems. Someone's been targeting Meridian assets, hitting them with surgical precision. No collateral damage, no civilian casualties, just corporate personnel and facilities." Marcus pulled up a holographic display from his own portable unit, showing a series of incident reports spanning several years. "The techniques are professional. The resources significant. Whoever this is, they're well-funded and extremely skilled." Zara studied the data, her hacker's mind automatically analyzing patterns and connections. "You think it's the boy, the survivor?" "I think someone with intimate knowledge of Meridian's operations has been systematically dismantling their frontier holdings," Marcus replied. "And I think it's only a matter of time before they come for the people responsible for Talon Prime." The implications settled over her like a cold blanket. Somewhere out there was a man who'd watched his world burn as a child, and he was working his way up the corporate hierarchy toward the people who'd given the orders. "Why come to me?" Zara asked. "If you want to find this person, hire a bounty hunter." Marcus shook his head. "I don't want to find him to stop him. I want to find him to help him. But first, I need to make sure the truth about Talon Prime comes to light. The colonists deserve justice." And the galaxy deserves to know what kind of monsters they're dealing with. Zara turned back to her monitors, her mind racing. The smart play would be to delete the files, wipe her systems, and pretend this conversation had never happened. Corporate revenge was above her pay grade, and getting involved with someone like Marcus could only lead to trouble. But she couldn't stop looking at the footage of Nia Thorne. The cantina on Nexus Station existed in that gray space between legal and lawless, where credits mattered more than questions and anonymity was the most valuable commodity for sale. Jorn Thorne sat in a corner booth, nursing a glass of Centaurian whiskey and watching the crowd through eyes that had learned to see threats in every shadow. At 20, he had grown into the kind of man mothers warn their daughters about, tall and lean with the predatory grace of someone who killed for a living. His dark hair was longer now, touching his shoulders, and a scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a memento from a corporate security team that had gotten closer than they should have. But it was his eyes that marked him as dangerous. The warm brown with gold flecks that his mother had loved had turned cold and calculating. The eyes of someone who had seen too much and felt too little. The job had gone smoothly. Another Meridian Dynamics facility. Another link in the chain that led back to Talon Prime. The research station had been developing new crowd control weapons, the kind designed to break up civilian protests without leaving bodies that would attract unwanted attention. Now it was a cloud of debris drifting through space, and 36 corporate scientists had been given new identities and transport to planets where Meridian couldn't find them. Jorn didn't kill civilians. That was one of the few lines he hadn't crossed in his 8-year campaign of vengeance. But the security forces, the executives, the ones who gave orders and pulled triggers, they were fair game. He was contemplating his next target when she walked in. The woman was striking in the way that dangerous things often were, tall and elegant with silver wit, a hair that seemed to catch light from sources that didn't exist. Her skin was pale as starlight, and when she moved through the crowd, people stepped aside without quite knowing why. She wore a form-fitting black bodysuit that suggested both fashion and function, and the way she carried herself spoke of confidence earned through surviving things that would have broken lesser people. What caught Jorn's attention wasn't her beauty. Beautiful women were common enough in places like this. It was the way she moved directly toward his table, as if she'd known exactly where to find him. "Jorn Thorne," she said, sliding into the seat across from him without invitation. Her voice was low and musical, with an accent he couldn't place. Also known as the Ghost of Talon Prime, the Meridian Killer, and at least 6 other colorful epithets, depending on which corporate bounty board you're reading. Jorn's hand moved slowly toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket, but he kept his expression neutral. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she smiled, and the expression was both beautiful and slightly predatory. "The man who's been systematically dismantling Meridian Dynamics operations for the better part of a decade. The one who destroyed Research Station Omega-7 approximately 6 hours ago." "No, I don't think I'm confused." That confirmed it. She was either corporate security or someone with access to real-time intelligence networks. Either way, she was trouble. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice carrying the kind of quiet menace that usually sent smart people looking for other conversations. "To offer you something you want more than your next target," she replied, signaling the bartender for a drink. "Information about the night your mother died." Jorn went very still. In 8 years of hunting, he'd learned everything there was to know about Operation Cleansing Fire, the personnel involved, the chain of command, even the specific ammunition used in the weapons that had killed Nia Thorne. But this woman spoke as if she had something new, something he'd missed. "I'm listening," he said carefully. The woman accepted her drink, something blue and luminescent that seemed to shift color in the light, and took a small sip before continuing. "My name is Vera Ashworth. I used to work for a very exclusive organization that specialized in information acquisition and strategic problem solving. Corporate espionage," Jorn translated. Among other things, Vera's smile turned rueful. "I was very good at my job, which is why I was hired to investigate certain irregularities in Meridian's frontier operations. 8 years ago," she paused, studying his face with eyes that seemed older than her apparent age. The official story about Talon Prime was that a terrorist cell had stolen classified military technology and was planning to sell it to separatist groups. The strike was presented as a counter-terrorism operation. That's not what happened, Joran said flatly. No, it isn't. Vera leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping. What actually happened was that a Meridian research scientist named Nia Thorne discovered that her project advanced biotechnology designed for medical applications was being weaponized for use against civilian populations. Joran felt something cold settle in his chest. His mother had never told him the specifics of why they'd fled to Talon Prime, only that she'd discovered something that had put them both in danger. She stole the research data and tried to expose the program through proper channels, Vera continued. When that failed, she ran. Meridian couldn't risk the information becoming public, so they tracked her down and eliminated everyone who might have been exposed to it. Everyone except me, Joran said quietly. Everyone except you. Vera's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry. I know how that must sound. Learning that your entire world was destroyed to cover up a corporate crime. Joran was silent for a long moment, processing this new information. It changed nothing about his plans for revenge, but it added another layer to his understanding of what had been done to his family. Why tell me this? He asked finally. What do you want in return? Vera hesitated, and for the first time since sitting down, she looked uncertain. Because the same program your mother tried to expose is still active. They've improved the technology, expanded the scope. What started as medical research has become something much worse. She pulled out a small data pad and slid it across the table. Project Chimera. They're not just weaponizing biotechnology anymore, they're using it to create enhanced soldiers. Living weapons that are stronger, faster, and more obedient than anything they could build with traditional cybernetics. Joran glanced at the data pad but didn't pick it up. And you know this how? Because I was one of the test subjects. The admission hung between them like a physical presence. Joran studied Vera more carefully, noting details he'd missed before. The way her movements were just a little too fluid, too precise. The way her eyes reflected light like those of a nocturnal predator. The way she seemed to exist in the space between ordinary and extraordinary. They enhanced me, she continued, her voice steady, but her hands trembling slightly. Improved my reflexes, my strength, my sensory processing. Made me the perfect intelligence operative. But the process isn't as controlled as they pretend. There are side effects, complications. Some of us don't survive the integration, and those who do. Vera's smile was bitter. We become very effective at our jobs until we start asking questions they don't want answered. Joran finally picked up the data pad, scrolling through files that made his blood run cold. Biological modification protocols, psychological conditioning techniques, mortality rates that would have made the researchers at Talon Prime look like humanitarians. How many? He asked. Current active subjects, maybe a dozen. But they've been running trials for 3 years. The total number of test subjects is closer to 200. The mathematics of it hit him like a physical blow. 200 people subjected to experimental procedures, most of whom hadn't survived. All in the name of creating better corporate soldiers. Where? He asked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. That's what I'm proposing to help you find, Vera said. I know their procedures, their security protocols, their weaknesses. But I can't do this alone. The modifications they made to me came with certain limitations, safeguards to ensure loyalty. She pulled back her sleeve, revealing a small device embedded in her forearm that pulsed with a faint red light. Biometric monitor. If my stress levels spike beyond acceptable parameters, or if I'm away from check-in protocols for too long, it releases a neural toxin, very effective at preventing defection. Joran stared at the device, understanding the implications. You're asking me to help you commit suicide. I'm asking you to help me die free, she corrected, and to make sure that no one else has to go through what they put me through, what they put your mother through. The connection was clear now. Vera wasn't just offering him information, she was offering him partnership. And perhaps, in the space between vengeance and justice, something more. The safeguards have weaknesses, she continued. Distance limitations, signal interference, specific override codes. With the right approach, we could disable them long enough to get inside their primary research facility, and then we burn it all down. Destroy the research, free the current test subjects, and make sure the galaxy knows exactly what Meridian Dynamics has been doing to people. Joran was quiet for several minutes. Considering the proposal, he'd been working alone for 8 years, trusting no one, depending on nothing but his own skills and determination. Accepting a partner, especially one with corporate modifications, and a death sentence hanging over her head, went against every survival instinct he'd developed. But there was something about Vera that called to him. Maybe it was the pain he recognized. The executive tower of Meridian Dynamics pierced the cloud layer of Kronos Prime like a gleaming spear, its crystalline walls reflecting the amber light of the planet's ancient star. In her corner office 90 floors above the surface, Kira, Meridian Kane, stared out at the sprawling industrial complex that bore her family's name, feeling the weight of a legacy she'd never asked for. At 26, she was supposed to be the perfect corporate princess, beautiful, intelligent, and utterly loyal to the company that had shaped 3 generations of her bloodline. Her auburn hair was styled in the current fashion, her tailored suit worth more than most people earned in a year, and her green eyes held the kind of sharp intelligence that had made her invaluable to the board of directors. But tonight, those same green eyes were filled with horror as she scrolled through files that should never have existed. The data packet had arrived through encrypted channels, delivered by someone calling themselves Digital Ghost, likely one of the underground hackers who occasionally targeted corporate networks. Usually, Kira deleted such intrusions without reading them. Her position as Vice President of Strategic Operations gave her access to sensitive information, but also made her a target for corporate espionage. This time, something had made her look. The files contained operational records, personnel reports, and security footage from something called Operation Cleansing Fire. As she watched grainy video of corporate security forces descending on what looked like a peaceful farming settlement, Kira felt her world tilt on its axis. She knew that face commanding the strike team, Vex Kronos, her stepfather, the man who had married her mother when Kira was 16 and who had been grooming her to take over certain special operations within the company. On the screen, children ran screaming as plasma fire turned their homes to ash. A woman, brown hair, kind eyes, knelt in the dirt while Vex interrogated her. And then came the order that would haunt Kira for the rest of her life: burn it all. The settlement erupted in flames, consuming everything and everyone. Kira watched her stepfather walk away from the inferno without looking back, his expression calm and satisfied. The timestamp showed the massacre had happened 8 years ago. 8 years during which she'd lived in the same house as the man responsible, shared family dinners with him, listened to his advice about her career. A soft chime from her door interrupted her spiral of horror. She quickly closed the files as her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Kane, there's a gentleman here to see you. Says it's about shipping manifests for the Outer Rim territories." Kira frowned. It was nearly midnight, and she hadn't scheduled any meetings. "Send him in." The man who entered her office was perhaps 35, with sun-weathered skin and the kind of easy confidence that came from living outside corporate hierarchies. His dark hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and his clothes, while clean, had the worn quality of someone who spent more time in starship cargo holds than boardrooms. What caught her attention were his eyes. They were pale blue and held a mixture of wariness and determination that suggested he was accustomed to dangerous situations. "Ms. Kane," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of frontier worlds. "Thank you for seeing me. My name is Dex Hartwell, and I think we need to talk about shipping manifests." Kira asked, though something in his manner suggested this conversation would be about anything but routine. "Cargo." Dex glanced around the office, noting the security cameras and audio pickups that monitored all corporate spaces. "Is there somewhere more private we could speak? What I have to tell you isn't safe for corporate ears." Kira studied him. her instincts warning her that this man represented the kind of trouble that could destroy her career. But after what she'd just seen in those files, her career seemed like a small concern. "There's a maintenance level below this floor," she said finally. "The old executive break room. It's not monitored." Dex nodded. "Lead the way." They took the service elevator down one level, emerging into a corridor lined with obsolete office equipment and forgotten furniture. The break room Kira led him to had been abandoned when the company moved executive functions to higher floors, leaving behind a space that felt isolated from the gleaming corporate machine above. "Now," Kira said, crossing her arms, "who are you really, and what do you want?" "I'm a smuggler," Dex said with disarming honesty. "Freelance cargo transport, mostly legitimate goods to frontier worlds. But sometimes I carry things that certain parties would prefer to keep off official shipping records, such as people, information, hope." His expression grew serious. 3 days ago, I was hired to transport a data analyst named Zara Nightfall and her associate from New Babylon to Kronos Prime. They're investigating something called Operation Cleansing Fire. Kira felt her blood turn cold. "You know about Talon Prime?" "I know that 8 years ago, Meridian Dynamics murdered an entire colony to cover up their crimes," Dex replied. "I know that one of the architects of that massacre is currently sleeping in your family mansion. And I know that you just received files that prove it." The certainty in his voice made her realize how exposed she'd become. "You've been watching me. My passengers have been watching you," he corrected. "They've identified everyone with access to the operational records from that period. You're one of only 6 people who could have retrieved those files, and the only one with both the clearance and the family connections to do something about it." Kira sank into one of the dusty chairs, feeling overwhelmed. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Dex moved closer, his expression gentling. "Help us expose the truth. Use your access to gather evidence that can't be dismissed or buried. Help US make sure the galaxy knows what really happened to those people. And destroy my family in the process." "Your family destroyed itself the moment they decided that corporate profits were worth more than human lives," Dex said, but his voice held compassion rather than condemnation. "The question is whether you're going to be complicit in that choice, or whether you're going to stand up for what's right." Kira looked up at him, seeing something in his pale blue eyes that she hadn't encountered often in her corporate world. Genuine moral conviction. "You don't know what you're asking. Meridian Dynamics doesn't just fire employees who betray company secrets. They disappear them." "I know," Dex said softly. "That's why I'm here. To offer you a way out that doesn't involve disappearing into a corporate detention facility." He pulled out a small device that projected a holographic star chart. "I've got a ship in the port, fast, well-armed, and untraceable. Whatever evidence you can gather, I can get it to people who'll make sure it sees the light of day. And then you disappear into the frontier worlds where corporate authority doesn't reach. New identity, new life, new chances to make choices that let you sleep at night." The offer hung between them like a bridge over an abyss. On one side was everything Kira had ever known: wealth, power, the security of belonging to one of the galaxy's most powerful families. On the other side was uncertainty, danger, and the possibility of redemption. "There's something else you should know," she said finally. "Talon Prime wasn't an isolated incident. I've seen budget allocations for similar operations over the past 5 years. Frontier settlements that mysteriously suffered industrial accidents, or terrorist attacks after discovering valuable resources." Dex's expression darkened. "How many?" "At least a dozen, maybe more." Kira felt sick saying it. "They call it the Frontier Development Initiative, but it's really just systematic colonist removal whenever something valuable is discovered. Then we stop it," Dex said with quiet determination. "All of it. But first, we need proof that even the corporate courts can't ignore." Kira was quiet for several minutes, weighing her options. She'd spent her entire life being groomed to inherit power within the corporate hierarchy. But what was power worth if it was built on the bones of innocent people? "The operational files are kept in a secure server on the executive level," she said finally. "Biometric locks, quantum encryption, the works, but I have administrative access." Can you get copies without triggering security protocols? Maybe. But once I access those files, there's no going back. The system logs every query, every download. They'll know it was me within hours. Dex moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of green in his blue eyes. Then we'll have to make sure we're long gone before they figure it out. The proximity sent an unexpected warmth through her. She'd spent years surrounded by corporate executives and board members, men who saw her as either a useful tool or a stepping stone to greater power. But Dex looked at her like she was a person worth saving, worth fighting for. Why? She asked quietly. Why risk your life for someone you don't even know? Because someone has to, he replied. Because turning away from injustice makes us complicit in it. And because he hesitated, then continued with surprising vulnerability. Because I've spent too many years transporting cargo and pretending that what happens on corporate worlds isn't my problem. Maybe it's time I stood for something more important than my next paycheck. Kira found herself studying his face, noting the way his expression softened when he talked about doing the right thing. In her world, people talked about ethics only when it served their interests. But Dex seemed